Okay, hello everybody. Hello everybody. Welcome back from lunch breaks. Those of you who are here on the same time zone as us and having lunch. Some of the folks joining in from the Americas, possibly you had a short break for breakfast. And there were some people joining in from right over Australia way this morning. I don't know, is that midnight feast time there? But I hope you've all had a good break and ready for this afternoon's as we continue with the all of the talks. And uh, to start us off for this afternoon, it's my great pleasure to introduce and welcome our next speaker, Helen Bruce, the author, folklorist, and storyteller. Helen is a dedicated researcher and explorer of British folklore, with over 15 years' experience of immersing herself into the rich tapestry of our mythic landscapes in this land. And I first met Helen last summer in person and was able to hear a talk that she gave then, talking about folklore. And I remember you were talking about it, explaining kind of it as not some relic of the past, but a living force that in this present day has really real importance in these times that we're in. And so I'm really honoured that you've joined us here for this conference, for this weekend summit, to speak with us. Since then, and what kind of Helen will be talking about today is she's embarked on a year-long pilgrimage with the Gurt Dog of Langport and discovering what she talks about as the storyscapes and those stories within the landscape. So please join me in welcoming Helen as she takes us on this journey through this enchanted world of British folklore and its enduring significance. So thank you very much, Helen, and welcome.
Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure. Jonathan, thank you so much for having me here this weekend. It's a real honour. And thank you everyone else who's come and joined us for this talk. And what I'm going to do, I am going to speak for a little bit about my pilgrimage, and I'm going to explain what sacred storyscape is and how we can connect with our own landscapes. And there's going to be plenty of time for some conversation at the end, because I really love to connect with and speak with all of you. So I am going to share some pictures. You're going to hear me just ask Jonathan to please pop up some pictures, because I'm going to talk a tiny bit about maps. And I think it's really useful for you to be able to see a picture of the map. So exploring sacred storyscapes, the mystic heritage of sacred landscapes. Some really beautiful words there. And I thought I'd begin just by asking, what is storyscape? Because I definitely made those two words shoved together up. And why is it sacred? So I'm going to show you in a second a map. But when I think of a map and when I look at a map, it's multi-layered. So there's layers obviously that we think of right away. So when we look at a map, we've got layers of landscape to create the full picture of the map. So we might have the bedrock beneath, we have the soil, whatever soil type it is, we have the water table, then we have what type of vegetation grows on top of the land, we have natural features, tors, rocks, but then also we have human features, buildings, roads, canals. But then there's also a layer of any map of landscape, which is the story of the landscape. And when I think of the story of the landscape, it's something that belongs to the landscape, but it also belongs to the people who live with, live in and connect with the landscape. So the storyscape is the part of a map that is a joint heritage between humans and the land. For me, and that's why it's so very important to talk about. And why is it sacred? What's so important about it? And again, for me, it brings in a concept of liminality. So in anything that has layers, and if we're talking about a map that has many layers, there are many in-betweens. There are these liminal spaces, and storyscape is very much a liminal layer in that map for me. And when I say liminal, so the word means in between, but it also conveys an in-betweenness where things are blurred, where magic is possible, where communication is possible. So the storyscape layer of a map is very much a sacred liminal space within any landscape. It's a space of overlap between flesh and stone, between land and human. And in that liminality, it's sacred because it's a place of connection, I think, a place of sacredness, an in-between place where we can listen. It's a place where we can be with the landscape and listen and experience these stories in our own personal way. And maybe it's a place we can speak as well, because I think speaking and our presence, speaking the mythology back to the land, hearing the stories and repeating them is very much a sacred practice from my perspective. So I'm going to show you a picture of a map now. Jonathan, could you please show the first picture, which is just a really plain map?
Yep, I'm on it.
He's on it. Amazing. So hopefully this looks just like a really plain map, because it is at the moment. But actually, you're looking at part of the Gurt Dog of Langport. So when I talk about layers on a map, there are loads of layers on this map. We can see the roads, we can see the little towns and villages, we can see businesses as well. But I'd like to give you just a second to look at this picture and see if you can start to see the shape of the Gurt dog, because his head, his ear, his body, his tail, his back leg, you can see his back knee bent, are all in there. And as Jonathan said at the start, my current project I'm working with is a year of pilgrimage with the Gurt Dog of Langport. And I'm going to tell you more about him, but I'd be interested to see at the end what you picked out in this map, because all the layers I spoke about are here. There is a sacred story waiting for you in this section of landscape. Okay, Jonathan, we can take that down for a second. I think everyone has seen it, hopefully.
Take it down completely?
Yeah, just take it down for a second. Amazing. So I can see your lovely faces again. So I think there's a cycle at work here, and I just want you to sort of have this in your head as we go on talking. There's a cycle at work between land, story, and culture. And land is feeding into story. Story is feeding into culture. And then I think culture should be feeding back into land. And it should be an ongoing and a beautiful spiral. And I think maybe some of the work we have to do is strengthening that arrow that goes from culture back into land, to make sure that that beautiful circle is spiraling properly. And engaging with this storyscape. And once we get our eyes in, we can really see it. So think of place names. Even as you're wandering around your real local area, road names and place names are amazing clues for you. And this empowers you. I think you are the person who can go and start to uncover your local storyscape. You know, find that layer that you can add to the map of knowledge you already have of your surrounding areas. So when we're doing that, you know, how do we connect? How do we actually begin to connect with our local landscapes and these storyscapes that we're hoping to uncover? So I have some words jotted down that I think are real keywords for this. And I've written presence. So the first thing we can do to really, really connect with our beautiful local storyscape, and we all have a layer of storyscape right on our doorstep to uncover, is to be present in it. and just go out and walk and read place names and, you know, speak to people you meet, do some research, start to find these snippets of story. And then I said repetition. So my pilgrimage with the Gurt dog, I set myself the challenge. I'm going to walk part of the outline of him once a week, every week for a full year. So it's 52 walks on part of the outline of the Gurt dog. So repetition is really important in order to really immerse yourself and get to know a landscape and its storyscape. I think you need to keep returning to the place. And that leads on to my next word is familiarity. There's something so beautiful that I'm already experiencing. I'm 16 walks in of 52, and I'm becoming really familiar now. I've done these walks again and again, and I've moved through autumn to winter. I've seen, you know, the river, because the river Parrot makes up part of the Gurt dog. I've seen the river flooded. I've seen it flowing really fast. I've seen it frozen. So I've become familiar with the many, many guises and various forms that the landscape can take. And then my fourth little bullet point here is action. We need to really choose. We need to make a choice. And it might be a pledge we make out in the land. We need to actively choose to engage with our landscapes and storyscapes and commit to really getting to know them. And I think getting to know them then naturally feeds into acknowledging them as sacred, and that feeds into wanting to take care of them and wanting to, you know, give them the respect that they deserve, you know, as sacred landscapes. So can I now show the slide, my second slide, which is the map, but I've drawn the shape of the Gurt dog on it. You're going to enjoy my wobbly line. Yes, there we go. Amazing. So I'm going to show you some slightly more professional maps later, but I wanted to have a go myself as well. So this is literally just the map that comes up on my phone. So when I'm doing my walks, I try and track to make sure I'm on the right area. And you can see the shape of the dog there. It's exactly the same as the plain map we looked at first. You can see his nose there at Burrow Bridge, his ear going up the A361 and then coming back. That's a much smaller little road towards Path A. And then we follow the long line of his back, his tail there, the curve of his tail. You're going to love this. The road is called Wag Drove. And then his knee is near Langport, and his paw comes down towards Muchelney Abbey. And then the line of his tummy is the River Parrot. So there he is in the landscape. He's 5 miles long. He is quite magnificent. And my pilgrimage every week, my walk is part of this outline of him that I've highlighted in yellow. Thanks so much, Jonathan. We can take that slide down now for a second. I really appreciate your slide assistance. So good. Thank you. So I'm going to tell you now a little bit about the Gurt dog. So he's so special for me because my special interest in folklore for many, many years has been black dog folklore and also the wild hunt, which overlap. And I've done a lot of talks about black dog folklore in general, which is an enormous and amazing topic. And I learned about the Gurt dog through my research and discovered he's quite near me. So I live in Yeovil and he's out on the levels, the Somerset levels towards Langport. So he's less than a half an hour drive. And I decided that, you know, just talking about folklore and sharing it was amazing, but I wanted to be deeper in it. And I felt like the connection between folklore and the land was simply so vital and so strong that I really wanted to learn more. So when I discovered that the Gurt dog was this huge shape in the landscape. You could physically walk along his outline. It was so exciting. And that was then I wanted to make this commitment that I was going to spend a whole year really getting to know this land glyph, this shape of the dog in the landscape. So I carried on researching about the Gurt dog, and I'm going to tell you a couple of interesting things about him. There's loads actually. But basically what he is, he's a 5-mile long land glyph, and he's made up of roads, trackways and rivers. What I love about him, he just straddles the past and the present. He's amazing because part of him is the river parrot, as I said, which has been here, you know, for a long time, natural landscape feature. But then his nose is Burrow, which is a hill. You can see Glastonbury Tor from it. It's like Glastonbury Tor. It's a hill that's been added to, we think, by people in the past to make it a bit higher. It's got red earth that's been taken from somewhere else, added to the top. And there's also the ruins of another St. Michael's Church, like the ruins of St. Michael's Church on Glastonbury Tor, on top of Burrow. And Burrow is the dog's nose. So that's sort of, it's natural, but it's been added to by people. And then along his back and up around his head, we have some quite like a large road. So his whole outline is, you know, kept moving and used by people on foot, dog walkers. It's got the flow of the river, and then it's got cars going along it as well. And somehow that absolute presence of the Gurt dog still here in modernity really excites me, because he's such an absolutely visible and physical manifestation of folklore that is present and alive and meaningful right now. I get very excited. So he was discovered, or rediscovered, as we will consider in a moment, by Catherine Maltwood in the mid-1920s, and he's part of the Glastonbury Zodiac. So there's more. There's 12 of these land glyphs of all the animals of the zodiac around Glastonbury, and the Gurt dog is the 13th figure, and he's outside the others, positioned as guardian. So he guards the other animals in the Glastonbury zodiac. But the process of re-mythologizing is really at work here. So there's an idea that actually Catherine Maltwood rediscovered these. It's not that they were there all this time sort of accidentally. They'd sort of grown out of these accidental placings of roads. David Anthony Hatfield actually says it's not a discovery, it's a rediscovery. Yes, they've been there for many years. So David Anthony Hatfield identifies the Gurt dog not as something new that we've just stumbled across in the 1920s. Actually, it's a rediscovery, and he says that the Gurt dog is part of the largest megalithic, Neolithic earthwork on the planet. And it's been here, and it was created and added to by our ancestors. And it's actually just that Catherine Maltwood rediscovered it in the 1920s. And either way, I kind of love it, whether he's part of something that was created and has been forgotten, or something that has been there and somehow unnoticed until now. What's exciting is that we know he's there now, and we get to engage with him and learn about him. So David Anthony Hatfield, he mentioned, he writes loads of fascinating things about the Gurt dog, but something that stuck with me, he suggested there was a solar ritual that was carried out where the river Tone meets the river Parrot, which is at the Gurt dog's face. So he suggests the river Tone like tongue, and he speaks about a solar ritual of feeding the Gurt dog at Easter. And I read that after I'd started a practice on my pilgrimage around Yule. I'd started dressing the Gurt dog. So on my walk, I'd made some biodegradable decorations and I'd hung them in the trees alongside the river parrot. So I just love to hear that there's a lot of work going on independently of re-mythologizing and sort of finding these rituals and returning to them, which is just such a beautiful way to connect with our local landscapes and a way to delve into that aspect of storyscape as well. So I'm going to be continuing my pilgrimage. It's going to carry me all the way through to October this year. And at that point, I'm hoping to have walked the entire outline, you know, at different times, but having walked the entire outline of the whole Gurt Dog. And I just walk, and my only intention is to be there on the dog and open to experiencing whatever I experience during that walk, which is just unfolding beautifully. I love the philosophy of phenomenology, and it's often on my mind. And if you haven't heard of it, it's such a beautiful idea. So it's the philosophy of experience. So all it's asking you to do, and it's what I do on my pilgrimage, I'm there just to experience. And according to phenomenology, experience is the ultimate source of all meaning. So our lived experience is our ultimate source of all meaning. And for me, that's one of the ultimate offerings we can give the landscape, is just to go and to gently be in it, offer the landscape our attention and our time, and be open to the land, allowing this reciprocity between us and the land to generate our lived experience, which is the source of all meaning. Oh, I'm excited. Right, okay. I get very excited talking about the Gurt Dog. I'm going to show you now just a couple of slides before we have a lovely chat of some of these places I mentioned on the Gurt Dog. So, Jonathan, we're kind of just going to go through the slides now. So that's our beautiful outline of the Gurt Dog. Here we go. These are some other maps that other people have created. And I wanted to show you a couple of variations because his head and his nose and his tail and his body are quite clear on the map. But part of the challenge and excitement of my pilgrimage is to uncover exactly where his legs are, because his legs on different maps show up in slightly different places, and they're not on really big landscape features. So I just have managed the whole outline in my most recent walk of his more obvious back leg. So I'm going to move on to the next going forward. Okay, let's go on to the next slide, please. Amazing. So these are a couple of other maps that I got invited into this amazing roundhouse in someone's garden in the little hamlet of Wag on the Dog's Tail, and they had these really old maps in there which featured the Gurt Dog and some more of the Glastonbury Zodiac. So I was super excited to see those. You'll see his legs again are in slightly different positions. Okay, we'll nip on to the next slide, please. Ah, beautiful. So this is Burrow-Mump that I spoke about. This is his nose. As you can see, when you're on the ground, you can have no perspective of the dog. You can only really see him on a map, or if you were, you know, up in a helicopter. But here you can see the really beautiful ruin of St. Michael's Church, which is on top of Burrow-Mump. And when you're up there, you can look out all over the levels. And as I said, you can see Glastonbury Tor as well. And I took these pictures on my walk. Lovely. Let's go to the next slide, please. Excellent. So this is the river parrot. This makes up the line under his chin and down all of his tummy, and comes along part of his back leg as well. So that's the sign. You can see just behind the sign the river at its normal height. We've had a lot of rain recently in Somerset, so there's another picture on the right to show you how high it's flooded, and a lot of the roads were flooded. And when I was walking, I knee-high boots, and I was still struggling to walk through the water. But I found it kind of exciting because the fact the River Parrot had flooded, it sort of dawned on me that, the dog is in the landscape, the lines of him can't physically move, but actually he isn't completely trapped, he can move and he can change, and kind of the changing of the flooded landscape reminded me of that. Okay, let's nip on to the next slide, please. So this is Wag Drove, and this is the line that makes up his tail. So we've got Burrow-Mump on his nose. We've got Ear Lake Moor near his head. We've also got Walkie's Farm near his head. And then we've got Wag Drove, which makes up his tail. And as you can see on the sign here, it's the site of the Battle of Langport on the 10th of July, 1645. And Langport was burned. And there's actually a line in a traditional Somerset wassail song. So if anyone's been to a wassail in the last couple of weeks, you might have heard it. And it says, "The Gurt Dog of Langport, he burnt his long tail." And it refers to the burning at Wag Drove. So that's just, I love it when folklore sort of gets into culture and it's been carried forward and people still sing this wassail song now. So the Gurt Dog is hiding in plain sight, and you'll probably find that your own local folklore and your own local layer of storyscape is exactly the same, and it's hiding in plain sight, just waiting for you. Okay, thank you for that slide, Jonathan. That can come down now. Ta-da! So that's all of my slides. I would really just love to, there's time, which is what I wanted, to open up for some conversation and some questions, please.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Helen. I'm going to start with a couple of questions, if that's all right. Your passion for it is kind of so palpable in there, and in walking us around and guiding us around the dog there, the Gurt Dog. It's that kind of the feeling of hairs on your back of your neck. This is kind of, these are drove roads. This is going back thousands of years of conversation with the land speaking to people, that entering story, and that continuing to kind of then reinforce how people walk and move around that land. It gives another meaning to the idea of walking the dog, of walking that dog in the landscape there. I'm really quite kind of curious about your work with pilgrimage. I'm based here in Canterbury. The idea of pilgrimage here, we know of Canterbury Tales, and that has been a historical thing. But I'm really curious, in the modern day, of what you see kind of as the role of pilgrimage in our modern day as a way of reconnecting with place.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really thought about the word pilgrimage, and I came to the conclusion it absolutely is the right word, because for me it's not tied to sort of any particular religious practice, and I don't feel it has to be. I don't think you need to be religious in order to experience the sacred nature of pilgrimage. I think for me, pilgrimage conveys a practice of choosing to have an intent which is sacred, and choosing to engage with a place and the journey to a place in a manner that is receptive and sacred. So I think it's a mindset. It's a really useful mindset in the modern day to have this mindset of pilgrimage. And I think a pilgrimage mindset is what's key to unlocking our storyscapes and connecting with our sacred landscapes.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see what you mean. If you're able to go and be in that space, then you can actually be receptive to the land talking to you, and it can kind of start feeding in that way. And yeah, inspiring the stories kind of going forward. I mean, obviously that's kind of the a key way that you work with it as a storyteller. I'm curious for those of us who aren't storytellers, how can we also uh, be part of kind of reviving these storyscapes in ways other than through sharing the stories of them? What kind of other ways could we do that?
So maybe I'm going to start by saying we're all storytellers, and we've evolved to be in communities that tell stories. But that doesn't mean we have to all be going to festivals and telling stories to hundreds of people. We can be storytellers within our communities, within our families. We can be storytellers online now as well, which is kind of amazing. We can join groups and share stories there. Or even we can just be storytellers in the fact that we allow stories to fascinate us.
Mm.
The very practice, and even if you go on your own, the very practice of learning a story and then visiting the landscape or the land feature associated with that story, and then simply bringing our presence. And even if we feel we could be thinking about the story, or we might want to be speaking some of the words aloud, back to the landscape is what's key. Storytelling doesn't have to be sort of, big or professional or scary. We can be storytellers just by connecting with and repeating these stories in whatever small ways, we feel comfortable with. It's about completing this circle that I spoke about. So land feeding into story, story feeding into culture. And it's about working on really strengthening that arrow that allows culture, influenced by story, to feed back into the land.
Yes, I really like that. I think there's a lot of the way that culture impacts on land is so disconnected from a relationship with it and letting it come full circle of letting the land speak to us, that it inspire our stories and then letting that feedback in brings it far more into relationship. Oh, I love it. I'm gonna stop myself there because I know I could kind of stay chatting with you on this for forever, and I know that lots of other people have been putting questions in. So I'm going to just invite Karen back onto the screen, if I may, and tick that box there. Because I'm sure Karen's been looking at the questions. Oh, no, that didn't work. Karen's, there we go. Been looking at the questions as they've come in.
Thanks, Jonathan. So there were two very specific, I think they go together. The one was about, it was from Amina about what does the Gurt part mean in Gurt Dog, do you know? And then there was from Delia, she asked, is there a story about Gurt Dog? Is there anything that you know?
I can totally answer both of those questions. They're really good ones. So basically, we're not 100% sure, but probably Gurt in Somerset means big. So we think he's just a Gurt old dog because he's 5 miles long. So I think Gurt dog refers to the fact that he's not a normal dog, he's massive. So yeah, as far as we can guess, in Somerset we say Gurt, Gurt lush, big lush, really lush. So he's Gurt dog, he's big dog, which I kind of love. And then the story, there's multiple stories, but the story I love, and that I sometimes tell, is because there's so the Gurt dog comes up in the landscape at Langport, but he also comes up in folklore in the Mendip Hills, which is in Somerset as well. And the Gurt dog in the Mendip Hills is a black dog apparition that appears in the hills. And often in folklore, we'll get these black dogs, and a lot of them are very scary. So there'll be omens of death. But the Gurt dog that appears in the Mendip Hills, he's a guide. He is a helpful black dog apparition. And apparently he was so well known that there was a saying, mothers wouldn't be scared to let their children play in the Mendip Hills because the Gurt dog would look after them. And his trademark is to basically find lost travelers, especially children, and help guide them down from the hills.
Amazing. So on those same lines, there's a question about, you mentioned astrological. Is that I can't remember the word used. Is it a reflection of stars in the sky? Is there actually an astrological constellation?
So we're moving away from my area of expertise,
Right.
but from what I've read, apparently, yes, and it's on my sort of list to look into this more. So apparently the figures of the Glastonbury zodiac at certain times of year align correctly with the corresponding stars. And again, there's an idea that the Gurt dog at a certain time of year, I believe close to Samhain, lines up in some significant way with the constellation of Canis Major in the sky.
All right. Then there's lots of questions pouring in. So the next two in a way are quite similar. Fiona asked, would you consider making an audio tour with your feelings and your knowledge and your research so others can join the tour? And then let me give you the second one because I think they go together well. Somebody asked, have you thought about expanding this pilgrimage to bring other people's stories and pilgrimages together as a larger magical act for the land?
Oh, these are amazing. So I would love to, and kind of, I think speaking about our journeys and speaking about our pilgrimages in groups is how wonderful things like that happen. So I do have an idea of, once I've completed my 52 walks, I'm an author. I want it to be a book that's kind of a companion to pilgrimage and learning about the Gurt dog, but in a much broader aspect, learning about the things we've been talking about here. So like a toolkit as well. So yes and yes. Yes, let's manifest all of those lovely things.
Oh, thank you. And then there was somebody that they're called Rhubarb, it says on the title, and there's a second one that's connected. She said, can you explain more about this quote that you said earlier? The cycle of the land to story culture and the need to make the connection stronger. And then someone came in later and said, can you also talk more about the story and the culture? So it's kind of all three. Can you say more about it for us?
Yeah, we could really get into that probably for hours. So hang on, can I look? I'm going to show you the on my notes. There it is. So this is what I want you to visualize. It's a circle, and it's a circle we can feed, I think, every single one of us. So if we're talking about phenomenology and experience, land, the experience of being in the land, the landscape features, the shape of the dog, discovering that, you know, these roads and rivers make up the shape of a dog, just so exciting. And so that's how the land feeds into story. You know, story begins to be created around these landscape features, around people's experiences of the landscape. And then these stories are shared and they're told, and they get into culture. So like we talk about the Gurt dog in the Mendip Hills, parents saying, oh, it's fine for their children to play because the Gurt dog is going to watch them. So that's a story that's got into culture. It's an accepted part of culture in that area, you know. And then culture, once stories in culture and it's become accepted, that's when I think it really has the potential to feed back into the land. So we can say, this land, this is the Gurt dog, this is sacred, you know. We can't build houses on the dog's head, you know. We can't do that because it's the dog. And if everyone knows the dog is there and accepts the dog, he's so embedded in culture, he is protected. You know, the land is protected because he's in culture, and that's how it feeds back into preserving the land so it can remain sacred and untouched in order to continue the cycle and go back to inspiring more stories.
And we need another hour.
It's true.
All right, another pair of questions that go together. Somebody asked if there was, is it known if there was a native wolf dog species in the area? And then the other person asked where they can find out more about black dog folklore. I don't know if they're connected, but they both have to do with dogs, so I'll leave it with you.
So I do loads of talks on black dog folklore, and if anyone's local, I'm doing one in next month at Chard Library in Somerset, and it's a free talk. So if you're anywhere near Somerset, look up Chard Library. I'm doing a talk on black dog folklore in February, and please come and I will speak to you for like an hour about black dog folklore. But honestly, there's loads online. My books that are out, I've got the Heat of the Hunt trilogy, and that's not just black dog folklore. When I write, I use story to retell many myths and stories, but as absolutely modern day. If you want something really academic on the black dog, there's a great book by Mark Norman called Black Dog Folklore. Recommend that. But there's the topic of black dog folklore is one of those ones that's so juicy and huge. Just go and use your favorite search engine and you can disappear for probably the rest of your life looking into that. I got so excited about that. Oh, the other question was wolves. Yes, we did used to have wolves in England, but we killed them all, sadly. But there's an amazing book by author PJ Richards called Deeper, Older, Darker. And again, it's like my writing, so it's not academic, it's a story, but it draws in the mythology around the last wolves in Britain and black dog folklore as well. So if you're into that kind of thing, that's a great sort of starting point that you could probably then follow some research outwards from.
Thank you so much. Krista is busy posting Helen's Facebook page in the chat because somebody actually asked if they want to keep in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, loads. Yeah, there's loads. I'm always going on about stuff. My Instagram is good because I quite often post my walks, my walks with the Gurt dog on my Instagram, and that's going to be posted up. And then I've got my Facebook page, Heat of the Hunt trilogy, is just for my writing, so I don't put my Gurt dog pictures on there normally. And then I've got some other links that I'm all over the internet talking about black dogs generally.
Right. And then I wanted to just let you know, because you're not getting to see the chat, that there are so many people saying, I love this. I love this. I'm so inspired. Yes. We had Max from Italy. He said to me, I'm going to read you his quotes. He said, I work so much with this. In Italian, please excuse my pronunciation, Max. In Italian, it's called toponomastica. I hope I've said that right.
Wow.
It apparently means names, history, place, and the genius of the place in one.
Great word.
Yes, so excuse my pronunciation, but yeah, there's a great response in there. There are more questions going in. I'm just watching the time. I don't know, Jonathan, if I should bring them in.
There's one question that's just come in, which I'm sure it's quite a big topic, but for people wanting to get in touch with their own local folklore and discover about their local folklore, what would be a couple of pointers that you would give for where people could start?
Okay, so really easy ones. Get out there and walk. Look at road names. Look at town names. Find a map on the computer or on your phone, and just start to walk. And it's repetition. It's being present. I think just go and be present in your local landscape. And once you've been present enough times, it will just begin revealing snippets of its storyscape to you. Yeah, that's literally the core of it. Just be present in your landscape and move through it and think about it and really look at it. You know, do one of those awe walks where you're consciously not looking inwards and not thinking about your day-to-day stuff. You're really just out as if you've seen your landscape there for the first time, and you're in that pilgrimage mindset and you're just out there ready to be amazed. And that's all you need to do, and it will just unfold.
Beautiful. One of the things from the maps that I find quite kind of staggering is that how the body and the head and the tail have remained kind of in place for thousands of years, but it's the legs that seem to be walking across the landscape. On one map they're here, and one map they're there. It's kind of, I love the idea that that's the part that's moving.
Mm.
I can't see the chat, so I wasn't sure if any other questions had come in there.
I wanted to ask you something because obviously with my Peruvian background, in Peru, there are also a lot of animals that can only be seen from the sky. And I'm fascinated by this parallel here. You know, I don't know if you've got any thoughts about, you know, like where did this come from that they built something that couldn't be seen when you're on it? You know, now that we've got the technology and the maps and we look from above, we can really see it. But there's something so mysterious about that. I don't know if there's anything you'd be interested in saying about it.
I think it comes to a mindset that was so much less focused on, you know, the validity of anything on a very temporary or very personal level. I think it's about having a mindset that isn't about how does this thing serve me right now. And I think that's where any of these huge and enduring earthworks and artworks kind of grow from. I think there's probably a mindset linked to this work that would be really beautiful to reconnect with.
Thank you. So there is a last question, but I don't know if we're going to have enough time, but I'll put it in there. Let's see. It says, it's from Nelly. She says, do you have any advice for lands that have been so damaged by urbanization?
Yes, this is where the re-mythologizing comes in. And so the type of folklorist I am, like, you know, I'm wild and free. So for me, folklore, I love to research it. I love to look at it in its context and from a historical aspect. It's so valid. But equally, as you know, as a folklorist and a storyteller, I will make things up, and that's great. Go and make it up. Go and you have the power, honestly, to go and re-mythologize your landscape, because at some point all of these stories were made up. So out you go. Urban folklore, like, I love it. So again, my writing, I love to do that, and I have absolutely in my books clashed ancient folklore and the modern world, and I love to smush them together, because I think folklore, its hugest strength is it can evolve to serve the culture that exists within, and that's how it lives and that's how it stays relevant. So go out, and the most beautiful gift you can give to that damaged urban environment is to bring your beautiful presence and your imagination, and you go and re-mythologize it.
Thank you so much, Helen. I'm going to kind of suggest that we leave it there. I can see that so many people are really enthused and inspired by what you've shared. This way of working, of listening to the land, letting the land speak and share its story with you. I love that idea of telling the story back to the land and starting to kind of reweave that connection between us and the land through stories, and let that shape our culture and our relationship to it. So thank you for sharing this so far on your pilgrimage with the Gurt dog. I can see that loads of people are really keen to follow the rest of the journey, and we look forward to hearing more. But thanks so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much. Pleasure. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody. Let me just drop the spotlights off the screen there. Excellent. Where are we now time-wise? 10:02. Brilliant. We're going to have a 10-minute little break here now. And after the break, it will be Krista and myself with our contribution to the day, weaving the sacred into the web of change. So we'll pop up a kind of a placeholder screen. It's